The Midnight Watch, the boy who guarded the sea. The year was 1942, and the coast of England lived in a state of permanent shadow. Every night, the blackout turned the bustling seaside towns into silent, lightless ghosts. A young coastal watcher named Thomas stood on the edge of a jagged cliff, his eyes scanning the horizon for the faint silhouette of an enemy fleet. He was only 17, too young for the front line, but old enough to know that the safety of his village rested on his shoulders. The wind was a freezing roar, spraying salt against his skin and numbing his fingers as he gripped a heavy pair of binoculars. The silence of the night was eerie, broken only by the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the rocks below. He thought of his older brothers, who were somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic, fighting a war he could only imagine. He felt small and insignificant against the vastness of the ocean. Suddenly, a tiny, intermittent flash of light caught his eye. It wasn't the sweeping beam of a lighthouse or the steady glow of a star. It was a signal of frantic, rhythmic code coming from a lifeboat tossing in the rough surf far below. It wasn't the enemy. It was a group of downed airmen who had been swallowed by the sea. They were freezing, exhausted, and drifting toward the razor-sharp rocks of the Devil's Cove. Thomas didn't have a radio, and the nearest outpost was miles away. If he left to get help, the lifeboat would be smashed to pieces before he returned. Without a second thought, he grabbed a coil of rope and a hand-cranked lantern. He scrambled down the treacherous, slippery cliffside, his heart hammering in his chest. One wrong step meant a fall into the dark abyss, but he didn't stop until his feet touched the wet sand. He stood on the shore, swinging his lantern in wide arcs to guide the survivors away from the rocks. The light was a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. For 3 hours he stayed in the freezing surf, pulling the half-conscious men from the water one by one. By the time the sun began to rise, 5 men were lying on the sand, shivering but alive, saved from a watery grave by a boy the world had forgotten. When the military arrived to collect the airmen, they asked Thomas why he had risked his life for a signal he wasn't even supposed to be looking for. Thomas looked at the golden sun reflecting off the water and replied, "Because in the dark, every light matters." He never received a medal for that night, but for the rest of his life, he knew that he had fought his own battle and won. He proved that you don't need a rifle to be a hero. Sometimes you just need a light in the dark.